Welcome to Other Stages, Season 2, Episode 8. My guest today is organ entrepreneur Nelson Dodge. Nelson and I have been working for almost a decade together now, and we're going to enjoy a nice conversation with Nelson in a little bit. But first, let's have a little music. This is my ambient experimental work called The Inescapable Past, and we're going to see a performance recorded on the Porta organ. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and if you'd like to support other stages, you can join me over on Patreon, or you can make a one-time gift on Venmo or PayPal, and as always, those links are in the show description. Now, I've been in the organ business in one form or another basically since I was a teenager. It all started, of course, at a little place called Pizza and Pipes. Back in the 70s, pizza parlors with theater pipe organs in them were actually very popular, and there was one right here in my hometown. And if you've watched this show regularly, you know that I've talked about this place many times. This is the place that changed my life. I walked in, I saw that organ, and I knew I wanted to be an organist. And this led to my very first organ selling job, which was, of course, to sell my parents on the idea of me being an organist. And, of course, I wanted them to rush out and buy a big fancy organ so I'd have something nice to learn to play on. Now, like any responsible parents, they were a little cautious at all of this because, after all, we went to eat pizza, and now all of a sudden I'm excited about learning to play the organ. They wanted to wait and see if I was, really serious about this. So I started hanging out in the various organ stores in town. Back in the 70s, home organs were extremely popular, and there were several organ stores right within a bike ride's distance of my house. And I ended up at this place called the Organ Piano Center, where I met Jay and Tony, two really nice guys who took me in under their wing. They taught me all kinds of stuff about playing the organ, and I did this. They did this in exchange for me scrubbing the toilets once in a while, sweeping and dusting, and we just had a good time. And I developed what I like to call my master plan for life at that point. I was all of like 14 years old, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in an organ store, possibly that very one, and I wanted to play at Pizza and Pipes at night. And, well, just to fill out my dance card, maybe I would play in a church on Sunday. Well, like any master plan that a teenager comes up with, it began to change almost immediately, because as we got into the 1980s, the Organ Piano Center, along with all of the other organ stores, started to decline because home organs were becoming less popular. The Organ Piano Center was closed for a while, then it reopened. Jay and Tony went on to other things, and that's about the time when my grandfather decided to buy a pipe organ. So at this point, I've got this pipe organ in my grandfather's house, and I got to figure out how am I going to put that thing together. And I started asking around, and I met the guy that maintained the pipe organ at Pizza and Pipes, and he introduced me to somebody else, and that guy introduced me to somebody else, and I finally ended up serving a kind of apprenticeship with a guy whom, well, we'll keep this anonymous, and we'll call him Bob. And Bob helped us get the pipe organ together, and then I ended up working for Bob, doing other pipe organ repair and rebuilding projects. Now, Bob was sharing shop space in a shop that was owned by another gentleman we'll leave anonymous, and we'll call him Boss Man. And Boss Man had a nice shop where he restored mostly player pianos and other punch roll player type instruments, band organs, orchestrions, and so forth. And so he was working with similar technology and had the tooling that we would need to do pipe organ projects. Now, technically, Bob and I were on our own over at our end of the shop, and Boss Man really had nothing, or shouldn't have had anything to say about what we were up to. But Boss Man was one of these guys that had very strong opinions about everything, and especially when it came to the restoration of antique musical instruments. So Bob and I would be over at our end of the shop discussing how we were going to do something. And if Boss Man thought that that conversation was running awry, we'd hear these angry footsteps. Stomp, 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 stomp. This goes here, that goes there. Got it? And stomp, 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 stomp back to his bench. And we just kind of put up with this abuse. It was daily. At some point during the day, boss man was going to come stomping over and yell at us about doing it wrong. So boss man really didn't care much for me. I was a very boisterous, rambunctious teenager, and I don't think boss man liked teenagers anyway. So to have one that was like ah all the time wasn't really to his liking. So I was on thin ice with boss man right from the very beginning. One day, I was at my workbench cleaning up some electrical parts that Bob and I were going to repurpose on a project, and all of a sudden, this beautiful girl comes walking into the shop, and I recognized her. She was a girl I went to school with. She was a girl I had my eye on and hoped to ask on a date someday. Well, it turns out it was boss man's daughter. So she goes over and talks to boss man for a little while, and then she comes over to my bench. And we start talking. Oh, yeah, I have you in biology. Yeah, okay. And we're talking, and she's getting flirty, and I'm getting flirty. And I'm thinking, wow, man, this is going well. I'm going to ask her out finally. And then I notice out of the corner of my eye, boss man is looking at me like this. Now, if the dad hates you that much, you're not dating that girl. And so I kind of abruptly ended the conversation, and that was the end of that. And, well, it wasn't long after that that Bob and I got kicked out of the shop. I met today's guest, Nelson Dodge, back in 2012 at an organ convention. He had recently become the Southern California dealer for the Rodgers Organ Company, and he needed somebody to represent the company in the Central Valley, the Fresno area, and we have been happily playing the organ game ever since. So please enjoy my conversation with Nelson Dodge. Nelson, thanks for joining me today on the show. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
As a young child, I grew up in upstate New York.
Ah,
And I have to say upstate because if I say New York, people think I'm from the city. And
exactly.
I've never really been there. So,
Well, New York State's a
but
big place, so yeah.
yes,
What part of upstate New York?
it was the Utica area. A lot of farm. Once you get outside the city, it's just all farms. It was a idyllic young childhood, but then my family moved to California, Southern California, near Los Angeles, when I was 11, and that's when I actually got into music. There was not really any music in my life before that.
So
Uh,
your
or
family was
my
not
involvement.
musical when you were growing up?
My mother played piano
Hmm.
and actually played a pump organ
Hmm.
at church, so that was my exposure to it. But I didn't have any opportunity to get into it. Although the last church that we were at before leaving New York had a brand new Hammond organ.
Ah,
So that was those were my early introductions to organ.
hmm.
Uh, not where we are now.
So when you got to California, what got you kind of started into learning about music?
Oh, my sister started taking piano lessons, and first 2 or 3 months of that, I noticed how quickly she advanced,
Hmm.
just from starting at zero, and so that got me interested. I thought, wow, if it's that easy, I want to do that too. So so I started, and it was easy, and I moved along quickly. And again, I was from my you know musical exposure at church. I was really drawn to church music. So
Mm.
not so much the kind of stuff you learn in piano lessons. So I was up and playing hymns just as quick as I could read 4 parts of music,
Mm.
and uh, and then after a couple of years, of that, I started having some opportunities to get my hands on organs
Mm-hmm.
at various churches. And without any instruction on organ, I just started messing around.
Mm-hmm.
But then I did have the opportunity in the ninth grade to take organ lessons at a private school that had a lovely little Skinner pipe organ,
Ah.
and which was about the best organ I had encountered up to that point. So that first year of high school, I had organ lessons and spent a lot of time, a lot of extra time, uh, supposedly practicing, but again, just exploring and really pursuing my joy there. So, and that got me into playing for churches,
Mm.
when I was in high school.
So, did you find yourself, as you were maturing, more attracted to the business end than the being a professional artist end?
Always.
Always.
Yes. I would characterize my career such as it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's been mostly accidental, but but the core theme in there is business,
Mm-hmm.
and being an entrepreneur. Early on, I was in the advertising and marketing business. I had an agency that I ran, but in the back of my mind, I had this fantasy of being in the organ business, and and to me that meant building pipe organs,
Mm-hmm.
which of course I had no knowledge,
Right.
no experience other than having moved one time, which was closely averted being a disaster, but not proud moments. But I did a little bit of just a very very minimal amount of looking into the business of organ building,
Mm-hmm.
and as soon as I realized that most small organ builders make no money, I
Right.
I kind of put that idea aside and decided it was really just a fantasy, and better things were happening in my life, and I needed to be content with that.
Mm.
Uh, so fast forward again, in 2010, I was approached by the Rodgers organ dealer, longtime Rodgers organ dealer in Los Angeles, and he offered to sell his business to me.
Mm. Well, I think what your predecessor saw was that you were a businessman who at least knew something about the organ, and that made you uniquely positioned to do something here.
It's a good combination, and it really does. I have the love for it, and that's what really sells.
Mm-hmm.
The instruments practically sell themselves, but the person standing there talking about it the way I do does connect,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't tell you how much fun it is.
What do you think are some of the kind of unique characteristics of being in the organ business as opposed to any other retail type
Mhm.
operation?
Well, it's a pretty unique business. In fact, when I cocktail party chatter,
Mm-hmm.
uh, when it comes up, I have to be careful not to become the party bore, but it's easy to do. Yeah, but for people who just really have no clue, or have never really thought about it, the first question is, oh, do churches still use organs?
Right.
Do they even buy them? And fortunately, yes. Our dealership, Church Keyboard, is the largest digital organ dealer in the Western U.S., basically, or on the West Coast. Uh, about if you go about 2 states in or so, I've got a half dozen other colleagues throughout the Western U.S., but their markets are considerably smaller than than what we enjoy here in Los
Mm-hmm.
Angeles. Last year, when churches all shut down for the pandemic, that was a little frightening. Uh, I'm sitting here thinking,
Now
what
what?
else could go wrong? Yeah. I mean, this has never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had no sense of where it would go. I could certainly imagine where it could go.
Right.
And that wasn't very reassuring or pleasant to think about. But we made some adjustments to kind of hedge things a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But then around June or so, things just went wild.
Mm-hmm.
We got busier. We're selling more organs than ever. And this year, 2021, has actually been the best year in the 11 years that I've been doing this.
How do you see things kind of coming back together? Because I think all of us feel that when we truly get to post-pandemic, as opposed to sort of right now,
Yeah, yeah.
um, that things are not really going to go back to exactly the way they were. Do you have any sense of how things might be coming together for the post-pandemic church keyboard world?
I think it's for what we do. I think it's going to be sort of back to normal,
Okay.
uh, regardless of how churches are behaving or operating
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. Uh, this core music aspect of it goes on. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
during the pandemic, one of the things I completely didn't anticipate was all the organists got stuck at home.
Right.
Many of their churches would not permit them to be inside practicing. So if you didn't have an organ at home, it was
You.
very frustrating
Mm-hmm.
and very scary for professional organists who just can't practice, and they freaked out. And we sold a lot of organs to organists. I mean, about 5 years worth. It was, I tell you, it was mind-boggling. So that's not going to happen again. But what started happening is organists were recording. They were making videos of the music for Sunday service at home, and it was all getting compiled into the video that got streamed on
Mm-hmm.
Sunday. So and that was amazing to watch, because I was just so impressed with how so many organists figured that out instantaneously, and were doing some very nice work. And a few of them we had to work with and say, how to record the organ to get good sound
Mm-hmm.
and so on. And of course, we were getting lots of calls about that. One of the things that I have just been working on the past year or so is an alliance with a pipe organ builder,
Mm-hmm.
a substantial sized builder that would enable us to provide complete pipe organs, new pipe
Mm-hmm.
organs, as an expansion to just the focus on the digital organs. So that's broadening our opportunities and the kinds of situations that we can get involved with. So and there's a lot of and there's still a substantial amount of activity in building new pipe organs or rebuilding existing ones.
We've got lots of new things happening in the last few years with Rodgers, and I don't shy away from geek stuff on this show. So let's
Good.
talk about a little bit about the new DS Core technology that our organs are built around.
I would love to.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
This is actually, this has been the most exciting thing yet for me. So just a little prehistory on this. When I started in 2011, Rodgers was just introducing a new technology platform that we called SSC. It was
Mm-hmm.
actually a technology developed by Roland, and it was a pretty substantial step up from what came before. And what came before that was quite good.
Mm-hmm.
And it, in retrospect, when I look back at 2011, I was just getting started. I was learning the technology, learning how to do all the technical stuff. Dr. Tall was my mentor and instructor in that. Uh, and it wasn't apparent to me right at that time what was really going on. I was just thinking, okay, it's this technology, I'm learning this, how to do that. Wonderful. That was easy. Uh, but I failed to appreciate that new SSC platform was, I landed the same time it did. And that's kind of what I grew up with, because it was new and there were new things to figure out about it. And so I became quite expert. I really, really drilled down into it to a very, very, a much deeper technical level than I'm supposed to or allowed to. But
Right.
I was really driven to make it perform, to really maximize what it could do. So I had to discover some things, and so I got quite expert in all of its capabilities, much more than some of the other dealers did, because they were still using the techniques and methodologies that they had developed over the previous 20 years with the previous technology, and just kind of rolled it over to the new organs, which didn't take complete advantage of some of the new capabilities that were buried down in the audio processing and stuff like that. Well, we won't go any further than that. That just gets
Suffice to say, there was a lot more we could do.
yes, and the organs sounded great,
Mm-hmm.
and you could make them sound even better when you really got in and fine-tuned some of these things. So that was all great and good and wonderful, and I had 10 years of doing that, and now we have DS Core, which is doing the same thing. It's sliding in the old stuff is kind of going out. They kind of roll them over one group of models at a time. So right away, I'm into the DS Core again to see what is it, what's new, how is this different, and it was quite different.
Mm-hmm.
Although all the familiar audio architecture and controls and those sorts of things were replicated, it all is familiar and resembles what was in the SSC technology, but there's some new things.
Mm-hmm.
And some new ways of doing some things, and new capabilities that just take these things so much further. And now it's taken me a couple of years to really get deeply familiar with these controls and understand how to use them most effectively. And I've discovered just how much different it is. And now I go back to one of the SSC organs, and it seems so limited.
It seems primitive by comparison, which is kind of weird.
It is kind of weird because it was so exciting,
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago. So it's that's why I say this is just the best thing that has happened yet, or the most exciting thing that's happened yet. And of course, a real fundamental piece of that, I think is we now have these very long samples of a pipe. Each note is recorded. It's what we call a sample, and those samples are about 10 seconds long. Compared to previously, they might have been 1 or 2 seconds. So the analogy would be a high resolution photo versus a low res photo. Which is just a lot fuzzier. But you get to that high res photo, and every detail is tack sharp, and that's what you get when you record 10 seconds of a pipe, there's a lot of detail going on, very subtle. But when you're able to replicate that through the digital technology and play it on a speaker, it makes a difference
It really
compared to
does.
not having that level of resolution. So as we all know, so now the way we're able to put that into a church and then through all these other technological controls that are there, really refine what it sounds like. We're getting that close to achieving the sense and the effect of a real pipe organ. And I'll just give you a real short story. We just did a big DS Core organ, a custom. It's actually a custom organ, but it's using that platform. And it's about a 80 some odd stop organ, big. For a small church, it's quite big. And I brought another organist over to demo the organ, and we played, and she thought it sounded quite nice, and I said, well, you sit down, you play a little bit too. So she did, and then she turned to the organist at the church that where this organ is, and she said, now remind me, how much of this organ is pipes? There, you don't see any pipes, but actually this organ replaced a pipe organ, a large pipe organ. Curiously enough, that's a different story. But so there's a history of having pipes there, and it was all behind screens. You didn't see anything, which it looks the same. So she's turning and says, so how much of this organ is pipes? And I just had to smile because there were none. And so that's for me, that's the proof of the pudding, is if you think there's pipes, I don't know how much better we can get.
Right. Well, and that's of course the thing. That was the goal, and so that's really cool thing. I think for me, listening to the new instrument, I did a DS Core installation at a church in Fresno, and brought one of my pipe organ aficionados over to listen to it, and he kept going around and holding down notes for a long time and listening very carefully. And I thought,
Yeah.
we got it. Yeah, that's very cool. Well, Nelson,
Yeah.
this has been a fantastic conversation today. I thank you for being on the show.
Oh, well, thanks for asking.
You are welcome,
This was a nice
sir.
surprise.
All
Okay.
right. We'll see you again soon. So that master plan I formulated back when I was all of 14 years old to work in an organ store and play at Pizza and Pipes and maybe play at a church on Sunday, well, that never really worked out. Or did it? One of the life lessons that I sometimes struggle with is that things are always changing, so it's not really a good idea to lay down a really rigid plan. And, as I've gotten older, I've learned to blow with the wind a little better. And I've always had to be constantly changing plans and switching gears and changing directions. But then there are a few things in my life that I just don't want to have change because I'm really counting on them. They're special to me. Well, there's a group of friends that I hang out with these days, and they have a saying we like to throw out once in a while when somebody like me is getting a little too attached to a specific avenue in life, and it's this: if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So I never did get to work in that organ store because, well, by the time I was old enough to really work in an organ store, well, they kind of have disappeared. But I did get to work in a regular music store, Charlie Daniels Music. learning about synthesizers and electronic keyboards was kind of a natural extension of my exploration of organ technology. And so Charlie was kind enough to give me a job right out of high school. I got to work in a regular music store that sold a lot of different instruments. I got to learn a lot about the music business, about the musical instrument business. And I got to be the keyboard guy, and it was a lot of fun for a while. And it was a great time, and I just learned a lot from that experience. And so I'm always grateful that I did get to work in a music store at least. And of course, well, every Sunday, most of them, for the past 40 plus years, I've been seated at an organ console in a church. Well, I never really had planned on church music being the main focus of my professional career. But things change, and that's really the way it worked out. I very rapidly ended up being a music director, choir director, piano guy, song leader, the whole thing. And I worked at 5 different churches doing that. And being a church musician really became the centerpiece of my career for most of my working life. When I formulated that master plan back when I was 14, kind of the number one thing was to play at Pizza and Pipes. That was my focus. That's what I really wanted to do. And working in the music store, working in the organ store, and maybe playing at a church on Sunday, those were the things that were going to kind of facilitate that, and were going to make that possible. Well, I didn't really get to be a regular organist at Pizza and Pipes, but I did play in a lot of nightclubs. I was the keyboard player in several rock bands. One of the bands I was in kind of did the club circuit in the local area, and we kind of played a few wedding receptions here and there. There was another band I played in that was house band, and we were there 5 nights a week for over a year. Those were both really great experiences. And along the way, I auditioned for an up-and-coming band that had a hit record. And as soon as I had auditioned and it had gone well and things were looking good, things fell apart for that band, so that didn't work out. But one of the other gigs I auditioned for was for a replacement, an off-season replacement act in Las Vegas. And this was going to be at a hotel that had a regular performer who performed most of the year, but then when they would take, I think, about 4 months off in the off season, this guy was the replacement act, and he was a costume tribute act. And the deal was that he would come out dressed as Frank Sinatra, and we'd do a bunch of Frank Sinatra songs, and then he'd go do a costume change and come back out as Elvis, and then we'd do a bunch of Elvis songs. And I was auditioning to be part of the backup band for that act. It was going to be 18 weeks, $1,000 a week. And this is back in 1984. $1,000 a week, all expenses paid, and I mean all expenses paid. I was going to be put up in a hotel suite, free of charge. I was going to have unlimited meals in the hotel restaurants, free of charge. I was going to have access to room service, free of charge, etc., etc. This was a super, super sweet gig. I didn't get it. I'd take that gig today if I could. So even though I never worked in a organ store, well, I've actually been selling organs my whole life. Every church I worked at had an organ that either needed to be replaced or rebuilt. The first church I worked at had the infamous Baldwin 5A, and you organists out there know what I'm talking about. And this thing was built in the 40s, had been in this church forever, and by 1979, when I started playing there, it was shot. And it just, the sound was really bad because, well, all electronic organs like that, analog technology electronic organs, work basically the same way. You have a tone source, and that raw tone goes through some kind of filter circuit, and the filter circuit reshapes that raw tone off the tone generator into something that sounds more like what you might hear on a pipe organ. Well, certain types of electronic components, especially older ones, break down over time, and this organ really sounded to me like the raw sound of the tone generator was running right through all of the filter circuits. So there really wasn't a lot of differential between the various stops on the organ. The flute didn't sound much different than the diapason, which didn't sound much different from the trumpet or the oboe. The whole thing basically sounded like a kazoo. I begged them, let's get rid of that organ. Let's get something decent in here. We can do this, we can do that. And I did not succeed at that sales job. They kept that organ, and it was long after I was gone that they finally built a new church and got a new organ. The second church I worked at had a Hammond organ, which is a nice instrument. But this particular instrument had one glaring flaw. It was really a home model, so it really wasn't equipped to project sound in a big church space. The other thing about Hammond organs is that they're different from a conventional organ. And in the context of church music, a Hammond organ is perfect for gospel music, but it's not so perfect when you're in a Catholic church and you need to play liturgical music. Well, I agreed to play this organ if we would down the road buy a new organ. And we made some modifications, and I just made the best of it for a while, and then one day it caught on fire. And then we got to get a new organ, and we got a really nice, proper, classic liturgical organ in the church. The next 3 churches I worked at all had pipe organs, and all of them needed extensive rebuilding and repair. And so every time I was having to sell the organ. And now I get to work with a good friend, and we sell organs all over the Southern California. And it's a lot of fun working for the Rodgers Organ Company. I get to not only sell new instruments to churches and individuals and other institutions, but I get to design and participate in the execution of large-scale and complex installations. So I'm having a grand time. And here on my YouTube channel, there's this show, there's my organ technology videos, there's my performance videos, and all of the other things I do here on YouTube that are all about the organ. So, well, I never got to work in a brick and mortar organ store. I was never really a regular organist at Pizza and Pipes. My adventure in church music was in a direction I had never planned on. But you know what? I have lived a fruitful and long organ-centric life. So the last piece of music I'd like to present today is an encore presentation of one of my favorites, the Toccata in F by J.S. Bach. Next week, join me for my big Christmas special. We're going to have lots of Christmas music and stories of Christmas past. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next week.